What's up everyone, it's Scotty with MoneyVest. So in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at all chip stocks, semiconductor stocks collectively. I'm going to break down the revenues, the earnings, the fundamentals. We'll talk a little bit about valuations, their balance sheet, the cash flows, a very quick overview and a summary of most semiconductors and chip stocks because this seems to be the hottest sector in the market right now. And I'm going to do a separate, more dedicated technical analysis on each company so that you can plan your trades appropriately. We're going to talk about them in, of course, on an aggregate basis and of course on an individual basis as well. As always, if you enjoyed this video and find it helpful, make sure that you drop a like and please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that, and links to our Discord and Patreon is going to be down below if you're interested in joining us, and of course getting access to all the members only private videos, including trade alerts and trade ideas. The first week of the month is the best time to join, and of course you will have access to our moneyvest.com platform here towards the end of this month, where we do have the early beta launch for all the members only. So links going to be down below for you to join and of course participate in our launch here. And we'd love to have you on board. And also do connect with me on Instagram. My handle is going to be CASWRP. So this right here is the companies are in question. Now, all of them belong to different processes within the semiconductor sector, as we are already aware. Of course, it starts with the foundry business, which is responsible for manufacturing and the development of chips. Then there's chip designers, there's equipment providers, there's integrated circuit providers, there's companies that are specifically designing for 5G, IoT, then there's companies focusing on CPUs and GPUs. But all of them have pretty significant exposure in artificial intelligence. A lot of them are very, very important to the entire semiconductor ecosystem. So on this list, I've got NVIDIA, Broadcom, AMD, Intel, Qualcomm, Texas Instruments, Supermicro Computer, On Semiconductor, ASML, and Micron. I know there's a few more that I'm probably missing, so this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but I wanted to obviously break down this entire industry, this entire sector in a more broader sense, and then we'll dive into some of the more individual stocks here. We'll talk about valuation. So this could be a little bit of a longer video because we are kind of compiling all the analysis for about 8 to 9 stocks here in this one video. So as we already know, NVIDIA is kind of like the leader and the king of the semiconductor sector here, $1.95, almost $2 trillion market cap. Broadcom is also a pretty big player with over $600 billion market cap. AMD more recently crossed over $300 billion. That's a record for the company after breaking out over 9% yesterday. Intel has definitely struggled in the last 10 years, $182 billion. Qualcomm is one of the few companies in the semiconductor sector which I do still believe happens to be a little bit more undervalued, relatively speaking, compared to some of the other stocks on the list here. Texas Instruments, also about $152 billion, also in my opinion has a lot of potential upside left. SMCI, incredibly overbought, has already 10x'd. This was one of the stocks that we talked about last year, very much under the radar back then. Of course, not so much anymore. It's very much mainstream. On Semiconductor, $33 billion. ASML, one of my favorite stocks, one of my favorite companies in the semiconductor chip sector based out of the Netherlands, $370 billion, had a fantastic trade on this stock here. And of course, Micron at about $100 billion, which I also believe has a ton of potential moving forward. So that's kind of like the breakdown of all the companies. Of the names that I just mentioned, my favorites, of course, are NVIDIA, but at a better price. I feel like $2 trillion is just insane for NVIDIA. AMD is my second best favorite stock in the semiconductor sector. For those of you who have been following me for a long time, we've made a lot of money on AMD in the past. It's one of my best picks for semiconductors and chips. ASML would be my third stock. That's my favorite. SMCI was very good under the radar from last year, but very much mainstream and too overcrowded at the moment right now. So if you come down and let's just dive right into the fundamentals of these companies. So again, if you take a look at the 1-year return year to date, more specifically, NVIDIA, is one of the best ones. SMCI obviously being the best one, 204% gain on a year-to-date basis. Then of course NVIDIA at almost 60%. Then we got AMD at 30%. And then we also do have ASML at 25-26%. So the 3 and 4 that I mentioned here, very, very strong growth. Micron underperformance, 6% gain. On Semi definitely down about 5.5% on the year. Texas Instruments down 1%. Intel down 14%, and of course Broadcom is up 16.5%, which again is very respectable growth, and Qualcomm is also up almost 10% year to date. So definitely SMCI, ASML, AMD, and NVIDIA 4 of these companies, including Broadcom in the mix, doing really well on a year-to-date basis. Other stocks are basically flat to slightly down on the year. Now, this right here is the valuation, okay? Now, this is where things are going to become very, very subjective, and this is where I want your guys' opinion in the comment section and which stocks among these that you believe is kind of fairly priced and reasonably valued in the markets right now. And I'll be very honest, Qualcomm is actually one of those companies that I find to be very, very attractive at these levels. ASML, not anymore. I mean, it's already rallied almost 100% since my video from a few months ago when I was talking about buying it in the 500s. It's gone up to over $900 per share. SMCI, now trading at almost 40 times earnings multiple on a non-GAAP basis here. When I first started looking at this stock, it was trading at about 10 to 12 times earnings. You go back to the video from back in March and February of last year, we were talking about this at around 10, 12 earnings multiple. Intel, there's practically no growth in this stock, so that's one of the reasons why I've never really been interested in Intel in the first place. It's got a big shift. It's got a big sort of transition coming on board with the foundry business that they are building in parts of the US, kind of competing with TSMC, which, by the way, is not part of this list for a very specific reason. We'll talk about this in another video. But Advanced Micro Devices, considering the rally of over 150%, so if you come over to Advanced Micro Devices, you'll notice that it's pretty much gone from $90, $93 up over 112%. So it's practically more than doubled, and as a result, the valuation's really gone up. And Nvidia here, I mean, one could argue that 32, 33 times earnings is not bad, but I will highlight that the earnings expectations are really high for Nvidia. I mean, they are expected to generate north of $40 to $50 billion in net income for a company that wasn't even doing close to $30 billion in revenue just a couple of years ago. So they have really accelerated that business very, very fast. And as we know, what happens very quickly, it's kind of like a fast burning fire. Is it going to be lasting super long? That is still yet to see. But right now, the optimism and the euphoria around Nvidia's earnings and growth and revenue is very, very high. So just got to be super careful and cautious here. Not saying that 32 times earnings is bad. In fact, quite reasonable for the company and what it offers. But I just feel like if the earnings expectations come down, because a lot of these companies here are not going to just sit back and let Nvidia have all the market share in AI. There's going to be competition from AMD. There's going to be competition from Qualcomm, SMCI, on semi. Of course, they are part of the different sort of ecosystem. They belong to different segments of the entire semiconductor ecosystem. But I feel like there is going to be competition, which is going to drive down some of that return on capital and profit potential here as well. So again, price of sales, we're looking at 32 times sales for Nvidia, which is insanely high. Like 32 times sales is what investors are willing to pay for Nvidia here. 32 times sales on a trailing basis. If you take a look at forward enterprise value to sales, 17.5. Even that is incredibly high. We got Broadcom at 12.6, AMD just a little bit under 12. Intel, cheap for a different reason, considering that the growth is really stagnant. It's not really growing revenue. In fact, it's declining. Qualcomm, as I mentioned earlier, still relatively much better at 5 times sales, 16 times earnings. We got Texas Instruments at just under 10. SMCI, 3.3 times sales. I mean, one could argue that even this stock is reasonably priced here. But again, expectations have skyrocketed for SMCI also, along with Nvidia. On semi, 4.6, I find that to be reasonable. ASML kind of on par with Broadcom and AMD, 12.2. And we got Micron at a little bit over 4.6 at the moment. So you scroll down a little bit, and then if you take a look at the compounded annual growth rate on a forward basis, 3-year and 5-year, we're looking at 39% for Nvidia, 11.5% for Broadcom, 28% for AMD, which is also very respectable and very good. Intel expected to obviously decline. Qualcomm at over 11%. So makes a lot of sense why it's trading at a much cheaper valuation relative to AMD and Nvidia. SMCI at almost 20%. We got On Semi at 7% and ASML at over 20%. And of course, Micron declining a little bit over 12%, which is exactly why Micron is not a stock that I'm personally considering, because it is expected to decline in revenues and profitability over the coming years. And then, of course, if you scroll down a little bit further, margin-wise, I mean, they are somewhat on par. Intel definitely struggling a little bit when it comes to the bottom line margin of 17%. AMD also at 17%. NVIDIA is absolute beast at over 56%. SMCI at over 9%. Texas Instruments 48%. Qualcomm at just under 30%. On Semi at just under 39%. And ASML at over 35% as well. So again, we can kind of go on and talk a lot about these companies. And when it comes to the balance sheet, NVIDIA's got an excellent balance sheet net debt of just about $15 billion, so significantly more cash than debt on the balance sheet. AMD is very similar. Broadcom, not the best. It's got more debt than cash on the balance sheet. Intel, same story. Qualcomm, just about $3.4 billion of debt. That is more than the cash amount. Texas Instruments at 3.2, and we got SMCI also with a negative net debt. ASML also with a negative net debt. That's one of the reasons why I was so attracted towards AMD and ASML and SMCI in the first place, is because of a very good balance sheet with lots of growth potential. But again, as much as I love these companies, we just cannot ignore the valuation, right? That's one of the things that I've taught on this channel for time and time again, is that you can find an excellent investment, you can find a great company, but if you're overpaying for it, if you're trading at the wrong price, then it just doesn't matter, because price is what dictates your future returns. Think about the people that have actually bought SMCI recently, right? Are they going to 10x from here, or should have they bought the stock 1 year ago? That would have been a much better price to pay for the stock, right? Price dictates everything. Price determines your future returns. So regardless of how great the company is, regardless how favorable that stock might be, regardless of how you feel about that company and how attached you might feel to that particular investment, please make sure that you do not overpay for that asset. Do not overpay for that investment. Do not overpay for that stock or that house or whatever it is that you're buying. Always look for deals. Always look for deals. Our job is to always look and hunt for good deals. So, considering all these companies, this is the conclusion that I've come down to. NVIDIA, ASML, SMCI, and AMD, these are 4 stocks among the list of the universe of these companies here that have the best momentum, right? They've got the best momentum. They're the ones that are performing the best. I mean, if you take a look at 1-year returns, SMCI is 749%, AMD 145%, NVIDIA up 240%, and ASML is up about 55%, and then, Micron also up 54%. But when it comes to better value for money, I would argue that Qualcomm is one that you can look into, that I'm going to be looking into, because I feel like it's still trading at relatively decent valuations. And then, of course, if you take a look at onsemi, but the only problem is that onsemi doesn't have a significantly high growth rate when it comes to the long-term trajectory. So, 5-year CAGR is about 7%, which is pretty average, 16% on a 3-year basis, and it's right now trading at about 15 to 18 times earnings, with a price of sales trading at a little bit over 4. So onsemi and Qualcomm, I would say there's opportunity there where you can find value for money. SMCI, ASML, AMD, and NVIDIA are very good, solid, potential tradable opportunities, at least right now, considering how much they've pushed higher. But they're still very, very overbought here. I'm going to go over to the technicals in just a minute. And I personally would kind of stay away right now from Micron, from Intel, of course, and maybe Broadcom as well, because Broadcom, as much as the growth is decent on a 5-year basis, 11.4%, it just doesn't justify trading at around 20, 25 times earnings multiple. Price to sales trading at a little bit over 15, right? So that's to me, it's a little bit higher multiple that I'm paying for a growth that I can find elsewhere for significantly cheaper valuation. So that is how I would look at these companies at the moment. So if you come over to the technicals, as we have already discussed, AMD here to almost $200 per share, breaking out from this symmetrical triangle. Very, very strong move to the upside. Same thing with NVIDIA, hitting a new all-time high almost every day, almost at $800. So all of them are incredibly overbought at the moment. Same thing with ASML. It's trading pretty much at over $950. Very overbought, has seen a massive rally from low 500s. From back in October, it's gone up over 67, 68%. And then, of course, SMCI also in the same boat, trading at overbought levels, very, very significant rallies to the upside, well over $866. If you come over to Broadcom here, it's also seen a massive move to the upside, a little bit of that negative divergence that continues. And I would be watching a very strong support here for Broadcom at about $1,167. So that is going to be that level to watch. And below that, we're going to be paying attention to another support at $1,036, $1,000 per share for this company. Qualcomm, we've also discussed in the past on our channel. So this right here was a lot of consolidation sideways and finally breaking out from low 100s. In fact, I think I did a video on Qualcomm talking about how Qualcomm is one of the best buying opportunities from a sort of reasonably valued priced stock. In the low 100s. In fact, my fair value was in the low 100s, and it's rallied over 51% from those levels. Now coming up to that resistance, of course, there is a negative divergence, so I'd be a lot careful here. And 137 down to 127 would be a much better price for me personally on Qualcomm. On Semi, still maybe has more potential upside here. We've got a huge resistance to watch at around here at close to $86, so that is going to be that resistance, and a very, very strong support sitting roughly at $66 per share. Also another support sitting all the way down to $59-60 per share. So the lower the better, and maybe there is potential for a head and shoulders over here, left shoulder, head, and a potential right shoulder with a neckline sitting right over here at $66. So if you do break down in the low 60s, that would be an ideal price for me to start looking into on semi as well. So hope you all enjoyed this video and a complete breakdown on a lot of these stocks here. I know it's going to be a bit of a longer video and we weren't able to cover all of them, but I will continue to kind of do these sector analysis where we break down different sectors, for example, energies, defensives, comm services, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity. So there's going to be separate videos dedicated to each sector and industry that I'm sure are going to be super valuable as well. So hope you all enjoyed this video, found it helpful. Make sure that you drop a like, subscribe to the channel. As always, happy investing. I'll see you all in the next video.